Can you believe it? We are counting down the hours now for Starship Flight 11, the final Block 2 mission and the last to launch from Pad 1 in its current form. It is, as they say, the end of an era, and that is just the start too, because check all this out. Indeed, huge progress as shown right here at Florida, Blue Origin now breaking into weekly updates with all this magic, and much, much more. Yes, it has been a busy week.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and with the clock ticking towards Flight 11, this week has been one where we've seen a lot of notices coming in. By Tuesday, the FAA had already published 3 NOTAMs for areas around the Bahamas and Cuba parts of the trajectory, as well as French Guiana. Later that day, we also saw the flight being added to the FAA's continuously updated operations advisory, which gives plenty of notice for each launch from the US. A slight mistake there saying Starlink Flight 11, but yeah, there are Starlink simulators planned to fly on Ship 38 of course, so there is that. Various other NOTAMs were released through the week, including ones for the Mexican launch corridor, as well as some for the Indian Ocean re-entry and splashdown areas. What is intriguing is that the landing hazard area is smaller for Flight 11 compared to others. I suspect that's part of the efforts that SpaceX and government partners have been making to reduce the impact of their launches across both Starship and Falcon. They posted this a few weeks ago. On Wednesday, we also saw the Marine Safety Information Bulletin published for the same expected liftoff time on the 13th, so we are looking good. Flight 11 will launch from Pad 1, which has hosted every single full-stack Starship flight to date. At the same time, it'll be the very last from this pad in its current configuration, given that the Block 2 Starship design has been made redundant by all the vehicles that will follow. Booster 15 and Ship 38 are those 2 vehicles that were set to be stacked together. After Flight 11, the action moves from here at Pad 1 to the rapidly evolving Pad 2. If keeping track of operations at Starbase has taught us anything, it's that SpaceX doesn't keep old hardware around for long. Once this flight is out of the way, they don't want to have Pad 1 sitting around here doing absolutely nothing. That's because they still have a tower here to be used, and a gigantic huge tank farm set up ready to go. We've seen from these documents that SpaceX intends to demolish the launch mount and flame deflector system. They will dig way down through all of those foundations and rip into making another flame trench, just as we've been watching here at Pad 2 as well as at Launch Complex 39A in Florida. This will of course be a considerable job, but it means that one day a new Pad 1 will come back to life. I think a nice way to think of Flight 11 is the end of the beginning. I mean, given that they nearly demolished it unintentionally with Flight 1, it's been a wild ride. What might surprise you though is that SpaceX has already begun some initial demolition work here. As we now know, Booster 15 is not coming back for a catch. Instead, it will splash down in the ocean, and they are now even performing a new engine firing sequence during the landing burn to improve the efficiency of the booster. This all means that the tower arms don't need any sort of catch hardware anymore. On Sunday morning, the crew were up on the arms and in lifts, working on removing the dampening cylinders from the catch rails. The systems associated with these cylinders help to soften the impact of the booster landing on the arms during the catches. Now perhaps these will be refurbished and used again on the catching arms in the future, or maybe a new design has taken over its role for those shorter arms. It's worth noting that this hardware is only used for the catches, not needed to stack the vehicles. Anyway, they couldn't mess around for too long removing things because we had a flight to watch play out. Booster 15, preparing for Flight 11, had been in the production site for just over a month since it last came out to perform its static fire. As you may remember from a few weeks back, this was relocated to the rocket garden, which is usually a pretty good sign that the final work and inspections are about wrapped up. On Tuesday, the booster quick disconnect at Pad 1 went through some open and closed tests in preparation for its rollout the next day. Sure enough, Booster 15 rolled out from the rocket garden on Wednesday morning and made its way through the Sanchez exit. Some mesmerising views there from both SpaceX and the City of Starbase X accounts. A nice photobomb from Cybertruck too. We've recently seen a lot of these being delivered to Starbase, in fact, as it seems that they're starting to replace the older work trucks with these sci-fi looking vehicles also made of stainless steel. With the booster soon rolling in, it made its way up to the arms in the pre-lift position. That simply simply means that they've been placed just below lifting height and are slightly opened to give the booster plenty of clearance to park between them. They can then just close in and grab the vehicle. A few hours later, the booster was airborne and quickly rotating over to the launch mount. As you can see, Shaun was out there watching along for all of this. Beautiful shot of that lift there too. It all seems to be a fast and routine operation these days. No problems there at all, and it was settled down in place within about 30 minutes of leaving the transport stand. Now, heading over to what will soon become the main focus at the launch site, Pad 2. All of the deluge tanks are now installed in place, and the blast wall shielding them from the launch is rising fast, with the wall next to the 5 big tanks now finished. In fact, the formwork is even being set up with rebar for the wall close to the 6 smaller tanks. Many areas dotted around the pad are being covered with concrete too, and this includes this patch right next to the tower. Underneath, the culvert is routed to deliver all of the commodities to the support bunker. Speaking of that, more shielding pieces have been added with very few remaining gaps left to be covered, mainly on the diagonal sides. Now, interestingly, the amount of scaffolding inside the trench has increased quite substantially again after they performed those deluge tests a while back. I suspect they initially wanted to pick up some data for the gas generators working while they actively pushed the water out. Now it appears that they've started to tidy up the pad itself. What exactly still needs to be done here is not known for sure, but we expect to see a detonation suppression system like they have at Pad 1 being installed. Another building that they have been assembling very rapidly, in fact, is this mega bunker right next to Highway 4. The last time that we looked at this in depth, it was really only a metal skeleton, but look at it now. All the concrete wall segments are in, and even the majority of the roof has been poured. It's still kind of a mystery what this building will be used for, but we haven't seen any complex commodity lines running to it. It does have these window-shaped cutouts though, and based on that, we suspect that at least the upper floor could be a crew restroom. After all, the heat down there can be absolutely brutal. Having a nice location to at least temporarily escape the heat and humidity would be very welcome for the team down there, I'm sure. Shaun working with us here would certainly agree, but of course absolutely loves being there to capture all of this. We couldn't do it without you, so thanks for being subscribed and watching along. There's a lot of creators quite apprehensive about YouTube, with AI content soaking up everybody's attention and views dropping in general, so we're grateful that you spend just a little of your time here with us each week. Heading over to the build site, SpaceX have started to bring the first of 4 tower cranes together for Gigabay work. That begins with the main mast being assembled. We suspect that these will likely climb themselves upwards, as nicely shown here by the Art of Engineering channel. Not long after the installation of the second tower crane segment, we got a surprise delivery of steel sections to the ring yard. Within hours, the crane was already back in the air, but this time for lifting a piece of the Gigabay, kicking off some initial vertical construction of this monstrous building. We had thought that we would see Ship 38 already at the launch site, but that is scheduled to move today on Saturday in the afternoon currently. They've been messing with the loading of the dummy satellites this past 24 hours, but they seem to have had a little trouble with them. They had lifted the tray in, but they were messing around with the first dummy satellite for ages. They seemed to get it sorted eventually. You can see them loading some there. It's worth pointing out all these presumed tile experiments on the aft flaps here. Possibly a bunch of tests to do with the tile adhesion, but we'll get some better views of that on its way to the pad. Now at Massey's this week, it appears that the repairs on the bunker to the north have been completed and they are preparing to install formwork for the roof on the smaller section. You can see the vertical supports here that will hold the roof up as it cures. The larger section beside it is also being tied in with rebar before it gets its chance to be poured. Now speaking of, they also completed a large chunk in front of the anticipated blast wall, which they will likely begin raising out of the ground here in the coming weeks. Over here at the commodities trench, more steel covers are going in to make sure that everything stays protected underground while the construction efforts move along. It's super important for us to understand how everything runs before all of this is hidden away, so the past month has been critical for RGV aerial photography. As always, supporting what they are doing here every week is amazing of you, just as it is for all the cameras on the ground. Now you can clearly tell which are the new covers by those that look clean, as opposed to the previously installed dirty looking ones. With all of these going on, the site is already beginning to look much tidier, and it's only going to get cleaner from here. If we take a look right here at the start of the commodities trench, the crew rapidly had the remaining pipes installed this week. These lines that lead to the oxygen side of the tank farm should follow this path over the pipe racks. At the methane farm, it seems that SpaceX is putting more focus into the smaller systems needed to integrate everything together. More pipe racks continue to be installed towards the commodities bunker as one example, and toward the ship's static fire stand, where we can see workers have staged some pipes on the first level of the ship quick disconnect structure. A lot is happening here too. We can see that they have welded some extra pipe supports onto the left leg seen here from above. The top level is still staged here nearby on the ramp. Here in the middle, you can even see where the flex hoses will pass through toward the main quick disconnect face. Now, it has been impossible for us to take our eyes off the Cape for more than a week at this point with all of the activity going on here. Tracking everything here is quite a task, and it feels like we spend at least half of our lives online, right? Well, it turns out the internet spends half of its resources collecting us. Seriously, try searching for yourself and you will likely find your information coming right back at you. New and old phone numbers, addresses, and even stuff you've probably forgotten about. It's kind of creepy, honestly. That's where Delete Me comes in, and they are sponsoring this video. It's a great service that goes around quietly cleaning up what has been recorded and sold off to big parties trying to advertise to you, and perhaps much worse. After all, it isn't like you can just flip a switch to hide all this information easily. You have these huge businesses out there called data brokers. They skim over everything that they can to grab your information and stick it up for anybody to purchase. To combat all this and protect yourself, just sign up with Delete Me, and before you know it, they'll send you a report showing what they've found and what they will be working on removing. They of course don't stop there. They keep scanning and clearing your details frequently. This recent Wirecutter article had the team test 9 different services and concluded that Delete Me makes the best choice for most people, so they gave it the top pick. They've removed over 100 million personal listings already, so they know what they're doing, and they've added a neat new feature recently too. You can now cover your whole family under the one account, so not only will you be protected, the rest of your clan can be looked after as well. You can tweak the privacy settings for each person yourself, or if they'd rather be hands-on, you can give them their own login to manage things their way. Since using it myself, I've seen a clear reduction in spam emails and calls, so give it a try using my link joindeleteme.com/Marcus for a 20% discount on US consumer plans. The URL for international plans is also right there in the description. Thank you, Delete Me. Okay, so back to the Starship related action at Florida. The Gigabay is now visible even from way back here at the press site close to NASA's Vehicle Assembly Building, and thanks to NSF's live cameras you can tune in to watch all this action with their 24/7 Space Coast live stream. Of course, there is really no better way to show this than from the air. Greg Scott, working with us here, has just done another flyover to check up on all the progress, so yeah, make sure that you are following on X there because there's a lot more to come. Unlike Starbase, where they have just begun assembling the tower crane, at the Roberts Road site they already have one crane hard at work with the second crane almost ready to start. It really showcases the individual vehicle bays and walkways surrounding 3 sides. That's a very neat way of making very efficient use of this space between these structural beams. The bases for the 2 other cranes have also been installed, so it won't be long before all 4 are working away together. Right here we can even see some walkways that ensure that the crew can walk between the currently unconnected work platforms quite easily. Even further over here, there's a lot more tower crane mast parts already delivered on site, ready to be used as the bay grows in height. Moving on toward the direction of Hangar X, just look at this. Yes, that's around 100 more Cybertrucks all parked there. It seems like SpaceX has placed a rather substantial Tesla order, so be on the lookout for them at other SpaceX sites. The assembly for the next Starship tower is showing big progress with 6 tower segments fully constructed now. This, as we mentioned last week, we believe is another launch tower given that it has all of the usual ship quick disconnect arm mounts. They've even started outfitting some of these segments with the walkways. Again, they wouldn't need all of those complex systems if they were just going for a catch tower. The start of the first shorter segment that sits at the top of the tower will start here really soon too, given that they've already completed the assembly jig here. With that, we can see 2 of the big corner pillars that have been staged right next to it. Right across the fence, they've placed down these rather innocent-looking I-beam constructions. Well, you might recognise those as they had these previously on top of the water-cooled steel pancake on the launch mount. With those now gone, it looks like the launch mount is really screaming ahead. 2 of the water deluge manifolds have disappeared as well since Greg's last flyover, with the 2 that we can still see, one on the ground and the other has been lifted onto the transporter, presumably to either roll to the pad to await installation or be moved inside the tent to be installed onto the launch mount directly. The ship quick disconnect arm, also for the tower at 39A, is still inside the tent being outfitted with all of its required hardware. Next to the tent though, the construction of the next set of tower arms has the main base skeleton mostly finished. The core parts that interface with the carriage are also staged close by, and more parts for that carriage have shown up here. It's nice to see these temporary tents have been set up so that the crew have a more protected work environment. So yes, it is all happening here. The big question is, when will that massive launch mount be rolling out? Well, it needs some monstrous lifting equipment, and as we touched on last week, an absolutely gigantic LR13000 crane had parts arriving. Well, just look at it this week. The base of it was being assembled next to the comparatively tiny LR11000 crane. That isn't tiny at all, of course, if we check out these humans for scale at Starbase, Texas. Yes, that new crane is a monster with a maximum lifting capability of 3,000 metric tons or over 6.6 million pounds. Also neat to see that the flame trench walls are now fully encompassing the launch mount legs too, just the angled areas left. Even at this distance we can tell the support bunker is coming along very nicely. Looking nearby at the tank farm area, we can see a bunch of the black pipe stands giving us good hints at how all these propellant lines will run. Other systems like the evaporators and skids with various control hardware components are being put together too. To feed the future Starship systems for flight, much more of the cryogenic storage tanks are being installed in place as they are delivered to the Cape. There is just so much action everywhere. Thanks again to Greg for all those great perspectives on it from above. A nice way to close out these Starship updates as we count down the last few days until Flight 11. Some other neat missions for the week launched with Falcon 9, of course. In the early hours of Tuesday from Space Launch Complex 40, Starlink Group 1059 was away with booster 1090 hurling it out of the atmosphere on its 8th mission. This was actually SpaceX's 130th launch of the year, can you believe, and they shared this nice long exposure shot right after. 28 satellites on board, and it was a shortfall of gravitas downrange to pick this one up. Indeed, after every launch, this growing constellation adds even more capability to the network. Starlink Mini out there, as posted by Starlink, is becoming more useful by the day. So flexible that these days you just mount them straight to your Alpaca and job done. Super fast internet on the move. Alpaca not included. Late that same evening, Group 1117 was launching from across the country at Vandenberg Space Force Base. This booster is right behind the record holder and was on Flight 29 here. It had been just 24 days since booster 1071 last flew, and I think the most amazing thing about that is that this isn't even close to the record. Given how many flights this has had, it's incredible how fast they refly them. Another 28 stacked there at Fairing Jettison, and as with all Vandenberg launches, it was the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You out there for the catch. Now, I just wanted to quickly mention this video shared by Don Pettit this week. This was obviously captured from the International Space Station, and clear as day, there is a Starlink satellite train from orbit. The station orbits at an altitude typically a little over 400 kilometers in altitude, whereas Starlink is about 150 kilometers or so higher. How cool is that? Now back to Blue Origin. Here we had the New Glenn booster, Never Tell Me the Odds, and it was being transported down to Space Launch Complex 36. Meanwhile, over in West Texas, they were simultaneously launching their much smaller rocket New Shepard on another suborbital spaceflight. There were another 6 passengers on board heading into the vacuum for just a few minutes, followed by the descent and a safe touchdown moments later. Of course, the community was much more interested in the behemoth back at the East Coast. New Glenn was making its way to the pad with some sweet drone footage of it rolling along. It's just so easy to forget the scale of this. The full rocket height once assembled is about 98 metres tall compared to, say, Falcon there, which is about 62. Again, Blue Origin are fully intending on recovering the booster during this mission on the ship Jacqueline, and if that is successful, they want to reuse the same booster for their third New Glenn mission, which will carry the Blue Moon Mark 1 lander to the lunar surface. New Glenn has now arrived in the integration facility so that they could begin the process of mating the first and second stage. Right now, it is looking like the launch has been roughly targeted for the start of November now, so it has slipped just a little, it seems. Now, we have just recently seen these intriguing scenes by Inversion Space talking about Ark, a new spacecraft revealed that is quite different to anything that we've seen before. Inversion Space is developing its own mega constellation as an independent space delivery system. Now, these are relatively small vehicles, and the idea is to preload them with supplies that can be dropped almost anywhere on Earth in under an hour. But how would that work though? Well, these could sit in precise orbits for up to 5 years awaiting the call to autonomously re-enter and make a high-precision landing at a chosen point. Ark will be able to do this because it has a lifting body design. Now, what is bizarre to me is how small it is. You would be forgiven if you assumed it was just a little smaller than something like Dream Chaser, but this is tiny. Ark is only about 2.4 meters or 8 feet long and only half as wide. Yeah, it's really small, and with these substantial control surfaces, it can use that lifting body design with the heat shield covering the windward side to steer through the atmosphere quite substantially. In fact, as they shared here, it should have 1,000 kilometers of cross-range capability during the re-entry, so by just having enough of them spread around the globe, they can quickly find one that is close enough to the target and then use that cross-range capability to do the rest. Ark will use this parafoil type chute to steer itself in the final phase of the landing, and it just plonks itself down on the ground so it doesn't need any sort of runway. Now really the only propellant it needs is for orbital adjustments and to, of course, deorbit. What I haven't seen much information on though is how much space on this little vehicle is taken up by all the systems needed to land. There doesn't seem to be a great deal of space for the actual payload. It's worth mentioning that the propellant on board is non-toxic, so anybody approaching the thing on the ground won't need special protective gear or anything like that. Who is this for, essentially? Well, it is all part of a defense system that would give the US military an option to deliver up to 225 kilograms of supply payload anywhere very accurately. With no human lives on board, it could be dropped essentially anywhere right into a critical area instead of needing to risk much more expensive vehicles to do the same job. What I'm confused about though is what this could contain that would be overly useful in any such situation. It's got to be something of great expense that would be useful at volumes less than 1/4 of a ton. The immediate thought would be something like medicines, but you also need a payload that doesn't expire for up to 5 years in orbit. I guess lightweight drones or anything like that that could help in a conflict or emergency situations. What do you think? I'd love to know what payload you may have in mind that needs to be delivered within 1 hour. It needs to be small enough to fit in here, something that has been predicted years in advance, and an item that can also sit around in the extreme conditions of space for up to 5 years. On top of all of that, it needs to be worth the many millions of dollars that it takes to put such a thing into orbit in the first place. It just sort of feels like a pretty niche sort of payload. It seems to me that with the budgets shifting dramatically from science to defense, we'll see a lot of these sorts of vehicles appear in the news cycle. I want to see more investment in science and exploration like we all do, but I guess the silver lining is that any investment into this sort of stuff eventually ends up creating new, cheaper options for exploration missions too. Now, Inversion Space, if you remember, launched a small space capsule earlier this year named Ray, launched on the Transporter 12 mission back in January. Now, with this, they could test out many of the systems needed for Ark. Ray separated away, stabilised itself, and had contacted the team within minutes. All very successful, and they had confirmed the avionics, guidance, navigation, and control all seemed healthy. It even sent back some images from space. When they went for re-entry though, the spacecraft didn't fire up its engines because of some electrical short in the ignition, so it's actually still up there continuing to provide valuable data to them. They did later do 2 successful cold flow orbital maneuvers which lowered and then raised its orbit, so they've learned a lot so far. So there we have it, my friends, another week done and dusted, just counting down the hours until Flight 11, and I hope to be back talking about some big success there for all of that. I hope you enjoyed this video, of course. Thanks for being subscribed here and for those helping directly to support all of it. If you missed this video, do check it out here. Thanks for watching all this way through as always. I will see you all in the next video.